run a small consultancy, and we do Rails development for business around Denmark. And one of those customers is GoMore. And Jakob said I would be talking about distributed teams, like in general. I won't. I will be talking about this one team that I've been part of for the last well over a year, and that's the team of GoMore. But first, the boring bit. So, how many are familiar with GoMore? Excellent. We'll continue on. One detail about it that we should mention is that we are currently present in 4 different countries, moving into the 5th. We have offices in 3 of these countries, so by nature the company is fairly distributed. The development team on its own consists of 12 people-ish.
Yep.
I think we were 5 when I joined a year ago. And we now 5 of these developers are in Copenhagen. Well, I should say the team consists of Rails developers, iOS developers, Android developers, and a couple of front-enders, and a product manager, product owner. And 5 of these people are in Copenhagen, 4 here in Aarhus, in 3 different places.
Yeah, 3 or 4 different. Yeah.
We've got 1 in Kolding, that's me. We've got 1 in Silkeborg, and we've got 1 in Lyon in France. So we are fairly spread out all over Denmark and even over Europe. Now this obviously gives us some challenges, and there are a bunch of classical challenges that every distributed team meets, and well, every team in general, but distributed teams have a tendency to make these challenges a bit more obvious than the other ways are. And one of these is communication. How do we even talk to each other? How do we know we are there when we aren't? The second one is staying in sync. How do we know what the hell the other people are doing? How do we know what I'm supposed to be doing? And there's one of team coherence, the whole notion of how do we even become a team instead of just being 12 individuals in each our own office. How do we grow into this bigger thing? And there's one of interdependence, the notion of how dependent are the team members on each other. And we'll get back to these 4 points one at a time, and we'll look at how we have tried to solve them at least. So we'll start with communication. The first general rule about communication on a distributed team in particular, and in general, especially if you are freelancing or working for someone who isn't right next to you, is over-communicate. You can almost not communicate too much. If you do communicate, if you do talk too much, or if you ask too many questions, it's up to the other person to say, okay, listen, back off, can you please leave me be, or log out of Skype or whatever. But no one has ever said, oh man, you're asking too many. Well, people want to make sure that the team works well, so they want to make sure the knowledge is spread around. So talk, challenge your assumptions, all these kinds of things. We know we need to do them, but you need to actually do them. Another thing that you run into is when you communicate by text, is how you present yourself when you write. Did you actually write that what you meant? Can it be misconstrued? And if you're adding a second language on top of this, you need to be really aware of how you're writing things. Jokes are okay, but seriously, come on, let's put a smiley there and an emoji, anything that conveys how what the intent of what you're saying actually is. And speaking of emojis, that's such a good idea. You can't have too many emojis, you can't have too many smileys or animated GIFs. Seriously, it might seem dumb and stupid, but it works. So, on GoMore, what we have chosen to do is establish a Slack channel. We've chosen Slack, it could be anything. And this works as our central hub for everything, basically. There are other alternatives. It could be IRC, it could be Skype, I guess, if you're not too many people, Flowdoc, you name it. What did we use when I started?
Campfire.
Campfire.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Slack is great, but when you start having a discussion with more than 2 people, it kind of breaks down. And for that, we have Skype, oldie but goodie. Seriously,
Oops.
no one likes Skype, but it works and it's free, so just go for it.
Mm.
You can pay for it and you get something. I have no idea what it is.
I don't know either.
This
We're
is,
not paying.
a Monday meeting with the entire team.
What about history of Skype calls? I think that's one of the great things about Slack, but it breaks down as soon as you have a meeting somewhere else. It's like you have to log and suddenly there's this gap and it's like, okay, what happened?
We haven't actually been too worried about that.
Okay.
Yeah. How do you mean history of?
So
What do you
let's
want
say
the history for?
You're discussing something and you're okay, let's get on the side.
Yeah.
And you can't see the conclusions of that call anywhere because it happened on Skype.
Oh yeah, because it's audio only.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. So I guess what we do is depending on what it's about, but usually we record it in some other form, like an email, summarizing what we found out, or enter it into some GitHub issue, maybe something like that. Typically. Mm-hmm.
Usually the discussion that happens in a Skype meeting isn't all that interesting, but the decisions is probably something you want to convey.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the problems with Skype calls is that they're not written down anywhere. They're still up to everybody, like what kind of thing? What's the
Well, as in any meeting, basically appoint someone to be you take the notes and you make sure that these are distributed to all the members, and that could, for example, be via email and oldie but goodie. Once again, email is not for group discussion. This is usually we use it primarily for announcements.
Yeah.
Occasionally for discussion, but it is primarily to say, okay, this is happening. Everything else goes elsewhere. I'll get back to that. Any
But
questions? so
excuse
far?
me, it's just about the history. It's interesting that you mentioned that because I was just thinking about the Slack history. I don't use that very much either, actually. But I'm getting the feeling that you do.
Well, when I was at Sandring, I used to because we had different time zones, and I would log in and be like, okay, some discussion happened last night,
Okay.
and then somebody got on a Skype call, and I'm like, okay, what? Then I need to
Yeah.
get in contact with one of the people on the Skype call. And say, what was your memories of that Skype call? Or, like, what was the conclusion of the
Right.
discussion?
Okay. That's interesting because I think the way we use both Skype and Slack is like a transient thing. We have some discussion and then we record it in some more permanent form, and that is usually a GitHub issue
Yeah, or the wiki
or the wiki, yeah, somewhere more permanent. Okay.
One thing you could do, and I think we could be better at this, if you start a discussion on Slack and you figure out, okay, we need to take this face-to-face via Skype, then actually after you conclude something, go back into the Slack channel and write, okay, we figured this out, so you have at least some sort of trail of what happened.
Right. It's very easy to forget that.
Yes, it's
Somebody
very
else
easy.
doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Are you using Slack just for the communication between developers, or are you having the whole company in that communication in Slack?
It's primarily developers. I think everybody has an account.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much they actually use it in the other teams.
I chat a lot with some of the other guys as well, customer care especially.
Okay.
Some are more active than others,
Yeah.
definitely.
And Slack actually has a limit as well, unless you pay them lots of money. It's transient for us. Sure. Next part is that of staying in sync. So if you have any communications related questions, now is the time. No? Excellent.
Did you try out Hangout other than Skype?
We have tried out Hangout, yes. They work. They don't work very well.
I think they've gotten a lot better recently. We tried them,
Especially the screen sharing works quite well
yeah,
compared to Skype.
but
Yes.
they have improved it quite a lot. We used it a few years ago, and people got so pissed that we didn't. we had to stop because people were just too annoyed with it. I think it's gotten a lot better, but we haven't tried it recently.
If you can work your way through the hell that is Google accounts, I think it's probably okay.
So you don't need a Google account.
Sorry?
You don't need a Google account.
You know?
Oh,
That's new for sure.
We're using it for the same purpose.
Okay.
or something, yeah.
Excellent. For screen sharing, we actually we did use Code Hero. No, what's it called?
Screen Hero.
Screen
Yeah,
Hero.
it doesn't work
Oh, wow.
anymore. Not really, at least.
Oh.
But it that was very good. But it
They got purchased.
by Slack, and now it doesn't work anymore. I was just discussing this with somebody today. So yeah, we're waiting for the integration now, unfortunately. Mhm.
So, staying in sync, that was, when I joined a year ago, that was a big problem for GoMore. We had 5 pretty good developers, each in their own right, and they were all freelancers more or less. So used to running their own businesses and used to doing things when they thought they needed to do it to do them. So that's exactly what they did, which meant that no one really knew what features were being made or how far along were these features and what should we work on next, and people just tended to do whatever they found important. That was great for the developers, of course. But the management kind of went, hey, wait a minute, what are we doing? Where are we going? Why didn't you do this? So we kind of decided, okay, we need to do something a bit more structured. And one good solution for that would have been like a Kanban board or something in the office that kind of breaks down when you don't have an office, or if you have many. So we sat around and we figured out that why don't we just use GitHub issues? We are developers, everybody has a GitHub account, our code is on GitHub, and let's face it, GitHub is awesome. So that was our first attempt. No, it wasn't. This is actual issues, and we've got a bunch of these down there. And that pretty much illustrates the problem. What am I going to be working on next? How would I know? What is Danny working on right now? How the hell would I know? So we looked around and we found this service called Waffle, which is basically a Kanban board built on top of GitHub issues. It integrates with their API and it works seamlessly. Any change you make. Oh, there was a cough down there. I'll get back to that. Any change you make here is pretty much persisted onto GitHub issues and the other way around. And this gives us the ability to prioritize stories. And this basically means when I start working in the morning, I go into the ready column, which my CTO and product owner has graciously prepared for me. And I pick the top one and start working on it. That's basically the process. I would like to hear what that cough was about. Who was that?
It was just the seamless.
Oh,
Really? We
have you had
no
issues with that?
Yeah, I think it's rather slow. When you have a lot of issues, it becomes quite tough to search them efficiently. We have quite some repos, and the way it works with labeling across repos, it gets a bit tiresome. So we moved to a strategy having one repo with all the issues and then have a pull request on the separate one.
Okay.
You.
Sucks.
Yeah.
that we should probably mention that Rails GoMore is a classic monorail, so one Rails application for pretty much everything. That also means we have one repo.
So
basically.
when you see this, it's really easy to see all the smaller issues, but it's pretty hard to get an overview of what, like, often when I'm working on something, I'm working on a bigger thing, and it's really hard to figure out what that bigger thing, which is what most people care about, from all the small issues, right? And I don't actually care what my colleagues work on the smaller things. I care a lot more about what direction they're going overall. And then, you know, the smaller things come down to code reviews and so on. And do you have anything to track that sort of thing, sort of the overall direction of each developer, or which developers are working on different projects? Or how do you manage sort of the higher level?
This is something we're still working on figuring out what is the granularity of the issue of the stories. Things we know are huge stories go into a milestone. I think we've got a couple of those. That's a milestone. So these are related.
Yep.
Yeah, we should mention it's very easy to filter this UI by milestone. So
Right.
it's so big issues. You can easily just switch to filtering by label or by milestone or by author or something.
So you
like
use the milestone and you see where, okay.
Yeah.
So if I take a look at all your milestones, I'll know what sort of higher level projects you're working on right now,
Exactly.
and which developers are working on them while you filtering.
Yes.
Okay.
You keep your mobile apps in the same repo?
No, we have the mobile apps are in a different repos, and their development teams are pretty much separate.
Okay.
They're just starting to use Waffle as well now, but yeah, they haven't been doing so.
That means you have more than one board.
Sorry?
Then you have more than one
Yeah,
board.
we have several boards here. We have 4 boards
They
because
rarely interconnect though, so we don't have we rarely have to make any synchronization across the projects.
You can have multiple repos in one waffle board.
Oh, but don't you switch between them on that top left?
You can link them. You can link them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
We have like 30 repos in one waffle board.
But that was
Okay,
a bad
so
idea,
that's
right?
asking for trouble. That doesn't work. Okay, that's a
That's
cool
the
tip.
reason for
How about you?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're deciding with the management team what things you're going to work on, and then you're like deciding and putting them in order, prioritizing them in the system here.
Yeah.
How do you then manage the fact that now they're distributed? One thing is putting it into a task and putting it on a board, whether it's Trello or Waffle. The context around the task and the motivation, that often goes together with why is this cool to work on, which can be quite important, which I feel often gets lost in those systems.
Right.
Initially, there's a lot of motivation around a project, and then when it's prioritized, then 4 weeks later, the motivation is gone.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah.
so how do you handle that side of the?
What I try to do is be very careful about providing good issue descriptions. So I usually spend a lot of time creating these issues and writing also the motivation.
Okay.
Kind of in a. So the GitHub issues are pretty verbose. They often include, because we had this issue, we need to do this, and this is how we're going to do it, and all these related things. So the ambition is that because we are distributed and people work at different hours of the day, it should always be easy for anybody to take, or at least any Rails developer to take one of these issues and look at it in isolation and understand what's going on, including links to relevant log files and stuff like that. So I try to keep these issues self-contained, so other people need to judge whether I'm doing a good job or not.
Like this or like this or.
I don't know, between 1 and 3 paragraphs, like this, and images and screenshots and stuff like that. Anything to make it easier to get a grasp of exactly what's going on. Because one thing that completely, I don't mean to hijack your talk right now, but one thing that really.
You should be giving it real.
Yeah, well, no, yeah. And one thing that can mess up this entire workflow is if issues are too brief. We've had problems with this in the past, that somebody says, we need to fix this. Nothing about why or how or what is even the problem. It's just check out this is wrong, and it's up to the developers to figure out what's going on. So yeah, we try to make an effort to describe carefully what needs to be done.
Yeah, having the why and the motivation is really important.
Yeah.
Because when your issues start becoming, well, step by step, you must do this and that, then motivation of the developers plummets. You don't want that.
Yeah, so that's kind of a balance. You need to provide a good description, but you don't need to tell people in a recipe exactly what to do. It can become too detailed so that developers don't need to think for themselves, which is also demotivating. So yeah, it's tricky.
Makes a lot of sense.
Do you have some kind of inbox or something like that for kind of unprocessed issues?
An
that are
RFC
not
sort of
really
thing.
That's the
That's
most common. That is
So they're not ready. Upcoming.
No, they're not
It's
ready.
Like it could be like an exception from someone else.
Yeah. Exactly.
And,
Yes,
and then we have an inbox of the product owner.
Yeah.
I guess his email inbox works for that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that means it goes from his inbox into upcoming already if he's.
Yes, if he determines that this is important enough that we need to do this as soon as possible, he'll just put it in. I guess. Another part of this staying in sync, keeping track of what is happening around you, we've basically solved by putting everything into Slack. So Slack integrates with tons of services. So put it in there, and we're trying to find the balance where it becomes noise and where it's actually useful. What we have found so far is we really want to have GitHub notify everybody in the main channel what's happening. And that way we can see when a new pull request comes in, and we see when it gets closed, we can see new issues being opened. And that it's a pretty good way of if you were in a physical office and someone went up to the Kanban board and moved a story to the side, you would notice it, and this is our way of actually noticing it.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to be experimenting pushing our error notifications directly into the main channel because we don't want to actually see them. So when they start appearing, we need to fix them instead of just ignoring them, raising the visibility of these exceptions.
That is tough love.
Yeah. And experiment as well. Team coherence was this notion of how do we become a team? How do we go from these X number of individuals doing great work to being a team producing even greater work? There's no easy solution here. This is where we go away from the fun stuff of code and commits, and we get into emotions and humans and that's hard. That's hard stuff. But it turns out that actually attaching faces to the avatars you see, something like just having your face as the avatar in Slack means something. That means you're human, and it makes it easier for people to relate to you, especially if you actually start meeting people in real life, and you suddenly that line of code didn't just come from Sexy Beast 01, it actually came from Jakob.
Oh well, you just busted my nickname.
And a simple thing as actually when you arrive at your desk in the morning, logging into Slack and saying good morning. It sounds banal, but it works, it helps. It makes the whole thing more human. Another thing we started doing is these Monday meetings. That's actually from today. Every Monday morning, all of the developers get together on Skype and we talk for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Pretty much Jakob updates us on what's going on with the business, what's our focus going to be for the next week, what have we implemented last week that was awesome, and we each get a chance to say what we've been working on and what we found great and not so great. And it's pretty cool hearing from people. We've just had one work 2 weeks from Thailand, and that was pretty awesome. Hearing, oh, where are you now? Oh, I'm just sitting on the beach.
And he doesn't even have a 10 now.
And he doesn't even have a 10. I personally find this one of the most important meetings we have during the week, because that really emphasizes the fact that we are together, that we are real people with faces and smiles and bad haircuts and bad days and what have you. This is still virtual though. Face to face on a screen isn't exactly the same as standing here in front of all of you. And we have instated, we have 2 developer days per year where the development team gets together somewhere. Last time was in Aarhus. And we did serious things, talked about boring stuff and nothing else. This is our chance to actually discuss how are we doing, where are we going, what do we need to do for the next half a year. How do we like the tools we've chosen? Much of this actually was decided, how we do things was decided on this meeting. And we get to talk a bit about technology and nerdy stuff as well. It's pretty awesome. And then we have the entire company. As I mentioned, that is a distributed company as well. And twice a year, they invite everybody to come to, well, we've been in Denmark the last few times. And that obviously includes the development team. So that's a chance for the developers to get together with customer support from Spain, for example. And this is...
Yeah, it was an awesome meetup.
It turns out that putting 20 people in canoes in the rain is actually a great way to boost morale. But it means something. You get to build a shared understanding. You get to know people, and you get shared experiences. It matters the next time you're actually chatting to someone on Skype. Interdependence, as I said, the notion, and this is relevant for any team. You will have things that you start depend on, and you depend on other people. And what the hell do you do when that person isn't there around? And when you start having a distributed team, you can't really just walk over to someone and say, "Hey, I need you at your desk now," or he might be a couple of time zones away. And the way we go back. There are two great ways to do this. When you want to reduce interdependence, you basically want to raise the independence of each person. So by making people more able to do everything on their own, they become less reliant on having someone else do it for them. That was right. And there are two great ways to raise independence of people. One is to teach them things, spread the knowledge that you have in the organization around. And the other one is to automate things. And hey, the last one is something we understand. When we started spreading knowledge around, trying to break down these knowledge silos that we had worked up in the team, one thing we tried to do was to stop working on the same thing all the time. It's really easy to pigeonhole someone into, oh, he's the API guy, or he does the login, or whatever. But it's pretty important that more people gets to be the API guy. Oh, girl, sorry. And personally, I like a simple rule that we haven't instated, but I like it in my mind at least, is that bugs should be fixed by should be fixed by someone that didn't cause it. Because that's a way to actually force people to get in there and see what the hell did this other guy do and improve on it. Another approach we started taking to spreading knowledge around is pull requests. And if you thought pull requests were a code review and trying to find bugs, you're right, of course, but that's definitely not the full story. When we don't do pull requests in the way that someone writes some code, submits a pull request, and then Jakob accepts it. We have everybody on the team can grab a pull request when they have time for it or is ready for it, and they can review it and they can merge it to master. And that means that we actually have the chance to see how everybody else works. We can be influenced about it, by their working style. We can provide our inputs. Hey, I did the same thing over here. Could we not reuse that? And that turns out to work really well. New people to a team might be fairly scared of actually pressing that merge button. They don't think they have the knowledge to accept things. And we basically said, okay, fine, just give it like a thumbs up or something, and that'll do. If you're unsure that you want to actually merge it, then thumbs up and someone else will look it through. In the end, it doesn't really matter. They should just push that merge button and get things in there. And then there's the third way we're using to spread knowledge around. And as you mentioned, how do we communicate a decision that was made in a Skype call or over lunch or whatever? And you have to write things down. I know it's boring and we don't want to write documentation, but it's so important to do. However, it doesn't have to be boring. The first place you should be documenting what you're doing, documenting decisions, and the knowledge that you have about your code is directly in your code. Write your methods in a way that actually tells what the hell is going on or why it's going on. And if you fail to do that, put it in your comments, put it in your tests. We have this directly available to us. So we need to have the knowledge here, not on some wiki somewhere. This one is actually an example of one of our methods, which is a huge part of some institutional knowledge that Jakob learned at some point.
Yeah, the hard way.
And I think this is actually this method in particular was caused by someone going, what the hell is going on here? Why do we suddenly do something when something is one pronoun? But now no one can be confused about what's happening. It's just, okay, this is some stupid case that we have to take. And this isn't hard stuff, this is just code. Failing that, we have a comment here because the code itself wasn't enough. Failing that, you have your commit messages. Write good commit messages, people. This is so important. Yeah?
I have a comment on that. I just joined a new team, and something like indenting your code.
Yes.
Not really how you indent it, but the strategy you use for indenting it can make a really big difference. And I haven't really noticed that for a couple of years. But I don't know if some of you do this thing about kind of indenting so the equals alliance and do map assign and that kind of stuff. And it's a terrible idea.
Yes.
Because the git diff will have all get the wrong comments. I'm like, can you see this? It's just I'm not like. And then I realized that a lot of people they don't really use git commits or the git history at all.
Yes.
They just like 2 days after it's written, it's not
It's gone.
Well, there's a flag for that. If it's just white space change, you can just add the flag ignore space change.
But there's just add the comma at the last entry in your map.
Is this something people do to other people's code, or like I don't understand the problem?
Yeah, it's like I'll just add a new entry into this map and then indent all the rest of the stuff because I happen to enter the longest entry.
I do that all the time. I'm so sorry, you listen.
Then you just destroy the history. It's like
Yeah, well.
No, you just have to blame the parent commit again and again.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
But maybe that's the way. If you have something shady, you just need to indent it in a way that I know that you can hide.
That's the way you hide the shady commits. Yeah. How else would you hide people things from other people? Yeah. Okay. Well.
Pull request goes a long way to creating a consistent style, and that's a great way to have discussion about these things. We have actually introduced Rubocop. Well, Jonas has, and it's now running on our CI. So if you do not follow the code standard that we have agreed to, your build fails and won't get merged. And we went through a longish process where we had weekly pull requests just fixing style. And that was a great way for us to actually go in there. I don't agree with this one, or I do agree with this one, and have the discussion there. And now we have, we have a formalized way that we wipe our code, and we actually do that.
Yeah.
Then at least you have a tool to do it to spend your time.
Yes, exactly.
Stuff.
In the end, it doesn't matter all that much. Where do we go? That was the commit messages. And if you fail to make good commit messages, you have your pull request as a sort of last line of defense. Go in there, add descriptions, add screenshots, animated GIFs, whatever. All of this helps when someone starts to track down why the hell did he do this. References to issues closed and all. And again, failing that, you have the issue that originally created this. You can usually have a lot of discussion in the issue where you have to clarify why are we doing this if someone didn't write it. Could we do this instead? So references from your commits to your issues is a good thing as well. And failing that, you have got the odd wiki page. We try to limit those because who the hell looks at the wiki? But they're there, and they do contain useful information on occasion. Automation. Yay. if you know how to do something, make a script that does it. Someone else is going to need to do that exact same thing at some point, and you do not want him bothering you. We have 40 odd scripts in our scripts folder at this point, and they do everything basically, from one-off tasks to pulling down the new translations when it has been changed or whatever. And it doesn't have to be great scripts. These initiatives like this tend to stop because someone figures out, hey, and then we should use this Thor, and we have a framework for building our automation scripts. Fuck that. Seriously. Just write a script, write a bash script. It doesn't have to be more fancy than that. It is important that it's there. One thing that we spend a good deal of time automating is our deployment. In the beginning, it was basically Jakob that could deploy the system, which is made a fairly big bottleneck on his end, and that was kind of dumb because he was basically just writing production deploy. He didn't actually do anything else. So that was an obvious target for automating, and that means that when someone, even the new guy who has been on the team for a day, presses the merge button on a pull request, we actually push that code live to production for all and every user we have. That does require we have a test suite that we are fairly confident in. It's not particularly quick, but it runs pretty much everything. We have tests for our JavaScript as well. So that's a good place to start. Another thing that makes this less scary is to deploy small things. You might have a huge ass feature, but it can always be broken down to something smaller. And we tend to actually go to great lengths to do this and be able to deploy bits of things all the time in a way that doesn't break everything, hopefully. We haven't played with real feature flags or something like that yet. We have a basic system for it. We can roll some things out to certain subsets, but in general we just we use our users as our QA platform.
And they love it.
They love it. They do. And we can do that. We have our user base is really engaged, and they'll notify us the moment something is the way they want it to be.
How do you roll back?
That's a manual process, but I think pretty much every developer has.
Well,
Can you do it with semaphore? No.
no, I don't think so. But well, we usually
We have a script for it.
we have a script for that, but also we can, unless it needs to be really fast, we can just revert the pull request on GitHub and then merge that. So you get matching the revert.
How quick are your tests?
Sorry, how quick the tests are? 8-10 minutes, something like that.
It depends on how backed up semaphore is, which is our CI server.
Yeah.
But yeah, running the suite on its own is probably 8 minutes.
Yeah, it's about that. But if something is, if we're panicking about something, we can do a Capistrano revert or rollback, I guess it's called, in just a minute or something.
And that's almost instant.
Yeah.
And then we do code reviews via the pull requests. The mere fact that someone outside of the original developer having looked over your code before it goes into production is a pretty good idea. It tends to catch really stupid mistakes that would otherwise be missed. So Ash, I'm running out of time here. Yeah, this is our deploy from semaphore. This is a time span of what, 2 hours? Yeah, 2.5 hours. So we deploy fairly often. So to sum up, communicate and communicate too much. avoid knowledge silos. Make sure that everybody knows a little bit about everything. Automate everything. Meeting in real life, that matters, it's important. Because we are humans, we're not tiny avatars on screens. And all of this is not impossible, it's not groundbreaking. Anyway, this isn't new, but you have to make an effort to do this. If you don't make an actual active effort, you will deteriorate and you'll not do these things. You have to be active and make an effort. That's what I have. Any questions? Cool. Yes?
Who's responsible for making this happen?
Sorry?
Who's responsible for making this happen?
The team is the easy answer.
That also sounds like the answer that won't last. Don't you need somebody who's kind of in charge? Or I don't know.
Do you mean the whole process?
So like the chief officer of happiness?
Maybe.
Sure.
Maybe. I mean, of course, if it's a culture already, then it's kind of rolling. But until you get there, you need somebody who's kind of pushing that habit. Kind of like if you want to introduce test or
Sure.
something like that.
I think, as you mentioned, it should become part of your culture, but how does it become that? And again, I'm going to punt it and say it is the team's responsibility. But that doesn't just mean that magically the entire team starts doing something in its way. And that's why you have to actually sit down at some point and say, hey, listen, I don't think this is going in the way I want it to be. Could we do things differently? And assuming that you have a good team together, people should have some sort of respect and trust in each other and be able to say, I'm not happy with the way we talk to each other, for example. And without any fear of being laughed at.
So I guess formally it's going to be my responsibility as the team lead to make this work. But I wouldn't be able to just push these changes into the team. I think the best experience we had with this was the team day, as you mentioned, where we discussed all of this about which project tool do we want to use and how do we want to arrange the workflow, and that we got everybody in the room and we talked about it and we agreed on certain things we wanted to do. So that meant everybody was agreeing on it when we went our own ways and started working on these new methods that we had discussed.
As a counterpoint to that would be the co-style guidelines, which was pretty much a grassroots movement by Jonas. He figured out, hey, he wanted to run Rubercup, and then he started actually just doing it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I did have to implement it very step by step.
Yeah. Like correctly, really.
You did meet some resistance, but it's a good example because now we don't think about it very much, even though it does break the build if something is not conforming to those guidelines. So, and initially it was met with some resistance, I guess you could say, and it's also a good example of something that came from you as part of the team that wasn't forced by me. It's just what I'm saying is it's my responsibility. Now you're asking specifically about the responsibility, and that's, I guess, the team lead's responsibility.
And in the end, everybody on the team has a vested interest in actually making the team work and a great place to be.
Yeah, it's just who's responsible and what can you do. I think one of the things we talked about with GoMore, when GoMore really wanted to start growing, the team was trying not to hire 5 people at once, but having them a little bit more spread out, so that culture could be passed on instead of 5 new people having to reinvent or having to make a whole new culture. Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Yeah.
Sounds really good. So, aren't you experiencing any like challenges, or is it all good? Or it's interesting to hear.
No, it's all good and fairy tales, unicorns and rainbows.
Exactly.
really, actually.
Well,
Okay, so
We,
yeah, what is?
there's always some, I guess. But as long as you have people who can talk to each other, and you tend to be able to work things out.
Yeah.
But again, this brings back to the communication part. Instead of walking around being pissed that someone did something or said something, probably just asking, hey, listen, did you really mean this? Or I disagree with this way of doing things. And if it becomes a problem, you can go, let's say, higher up in the chain and talk to someone else.
But then I think it's actually really interesting to understand how do you get a new member into the team then, or someone remotely, because you have a clear way of doing it. And of course, you learn by doing here.
So are you talking about the hiring process or the first days at work? Or?
Yeah, I would say once you have a new person joining the team, I mean, to make sure that you can reinforce, just like you said before, instead of hiring 5 new people at the same time.
How we bring them up to speed on the team?
Yeah, exactly. And
Well,
things are working.
We throw them in a deep end, basically.
yeah, we have a policy of having them commit something to the production system on the first day, just kind of as I guess that's stolen from DHH or something like that.
Probably.
Base camp. Yeah.
And it's a good way because people on the first day they're a bit insecure and then nervous. Oh, I don't want to break anything, and we pretty much want to tell them, go ahead, break stuff. We dare you. Yeah. They usually don't.
I think
break anything.
there isn't. Well, this is the way we do things, but it's not. There isn't a lot of implicit knowledge or secret knowledge that we don't. It's very obvious once you get into the Slack channel how stuff works, I think. But yeah, well.
And this way of working is it working well from the management side as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're happy about it.
I think so, because it's everything becomes very transparent.
Yeah.
I think you're asking about challenges, and obviously all teams do have challenges. I think the ones, if I once mentioned something, it's when we fail to communicate clearly enough that some decision has been made, and everybody needs to be aware of that. Sometimes if people get surprised that something has happened or has been decided, that's absolutely a bad thing. And that's but the funny thing is it's not a particular problem on our team compared to the places I've worked previously. It's not inherent to the being distributed part. It's just failure to communicate well enough.
Yes.
There's always an issue. So nothing in particular comes to mind about the distributed part. All right. Should we round up here? All right. Thanks, Jakob.